G'day, you're listening to the Big Breakdown podcast with Kris, Stafford and Harrison Marshall. Take it away, fellas.
Hello and welcome along to the Big Breakdown podcast. I'll start again. This is the awkward bit, Richard. It takes me a while to get started, especially when it's 7:39 in the morning.
Go, Kris. I'm with you, son.
Hello and welcome along to season 2 of the Big Breakdown podcast, where in this season we are analysing the serial winning attributes of coaching and what we can take into the community game. Today we are focusing on people. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host Harrison. Harrison, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Kris. I'm good. I'm very excited to get into this conversation with the guest that we've got on today. I think we're planning the season. We've started looking at this guy's work, and it's really kind of reached out to us, especially around this vision of people. So I'm very excited. Yourself?
Yeah, same. It's our second international guest. The first one's got me out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning for the recording down in New Zealand, but I'm looking forward to it. So should we get started? Today's guest is Richard Smith from Lightsmith Performance Consultancy and co-author of Sports Coaching and Learning. Richard started his journey working in education and coached rugby union at various levels, including Canterbury Under-19 Colts, Canterbury B, and in 2007 winning the IRB Under-19 World Cup with New Zealand Under-19s in Belfast. He transitioned into a role with High Performance Sport New Zealand as a high-performance coaching consultant, working alongside athletics, cricket, cycling, triathlon, Paralympics and Winter Olympic programs. Moving to the Crusaders Rugby Union, Richard was responsible for people and performance. He oversaw player contracting, the growth of the support team, and the development of their new high-performance training facility and the establishment of the first Super Rugby Academy in New Zealand. Richard worked as high-performance coach, development manager for New Zealand Cricket for 5 years, where he developed their high-performance coaching strategy, success profile, succession planning, and development of their high-performance development program. Richard is passionate about working with people and helping them grow professionally and personally. Over the last 6 years, he has been developing this through Lightsmith Performance Consultancy, working with New Zealand Rugby, England Rugby, Bupa Healthcare, and the New Zealand Spinal Trust, to name a few. Today, he joins us to chat about people and people development and coaching. Richard, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Kris, Harrison, absolute pleasure, mate. And really enjoyed just our pre-recording conversations. So I can see a couple of good blokes in front of me.
Oh, I appreciate that, Richard. I think I listened to the Talking Performance podcast with Jay Carter, and I heard you on that, and said to Harrison, I think we need to get Richard on because everything you were speaking about, I just sort of aligned to and thought this is great. I think we need to sort of push this a little bit more. Obviously, for this episode specifically, we're looking at people and how that links in sort of an attributes of a serial winning coach. And I think that's something that amateur coaches or grassroots coaches can take on board. Just from your experiences and people that you've worked with, what are some of the key characteristics that sort of coaches need to develop people?
Well, Kris, I'm going to jump straight to that great beard from your country, Shakespeare, who, in a line from, I can't even remember. It might be Hamlet, but it was "To thine own self be true," is the first thing. And then there's a guy called Otto Scharmer, who's professor of leadership and management at MIT in the States, and he developed the U theory of leadership. And Scharmer talks about the interior condition of the intervener. And for me, as I've evolved and how I understand things over the years, if you're working with people, the first person that you got to start with is yourself. And people say, well, what's that about? And I think there's a couple of things there. It's awareness. It's awareness of self, and then awareness of others. And if you look at Goleman's work around emotional intelligence, you'll see where I'm coming from. And I'm a magpie, mate. There'll be nothing original here tonight. I'm not going to say anything profound. I've flogged everything. But that's the thing. I think what we've got to do, if we're working with people at any level, we've got to there's so many good people out there, far, the wisdom lies in the world, what we've got to do is condense, synthesize, filter, remove the barriers, and then work out how does it fit. so how do we help coaches at any level develop that self-awareness? And that doesn't matter if it's a young coach or a coach just coaching kids, them becoming aware of the impact they can have on others through the way they act and behave, talk, present themselves. Yeah. So, over the years, I guess I've worked really hard. This would be the same kind of dialogue I would be having with a coach. What did you notice about your coaching? What did you notice about the person and how they responded to you, or the people? What did you notice about the interactions that were coming back to you? That's for me, I can't condense it into any more than that. Really, it's one of those fluid things. In the old days, I'd be, if you asked me this question 20 years ago, I'd probably be pretty prescriptive. But I'm not anymore. You remember Danny Glover? You remember Danny Glover and what's that movie he's in with Die Hard? Is it? No, not Die Hard. With Mel Gibson. What was
Lethal
the movie?
Weapon.
Lethal Weapon. He goes, "I'm too old for this shit." I'm kind of, hey, there's just so much good stuff out there. Let's not. A mate of mine said to me one day, he said, RJ, they call me, is my nickname. They said, hey, because I love a model. I love Dreyfus model. I love levels of perspective. I love a model. And he said to me one day, he's a sports psychologist. He said, RJ, don't fall in love with your model. Which is fine if you're Rod Stewart, because you can fall in love with your model and you usually marry them. But,
I think you're
no good if you're a coach.
Well, no, I think it's right. Because I think sometimes, especially with models, we try to apply them to every situation, when actually, one of the key things we learned here on the Masters was that what works for who in what circumstance and why. So, even with that, reflection is really important, but how I reflect would be completely different to how Harrison might reflect in terms of what's best for our learning as well. And I think that's, especially with coaching within team sports such as rugby, that usually gets lost because the amount of people that are in front of you. You've got different bodies in training. It's difficult to then manage that expectation.
Yeah, and that's the beauty, and that, Kris, you did right. That's how I think our models should be used. They're there to help us make sense of complexity and ambiguity. I'm not sure if you're familiar, some of the competency frameworks that have come out of DDI or Lominger, they're sort of big, corporate organizations in the States that have developed frameworks around appointing CEOs and stuff like that, and they actually do a good job. And one of the terms they use is dealing with ambiguity. So if you're looking to appoint someone to a head coach role, you might ask, how can you handle the two extremes? Because as you and I know, or the three of us know, it is not black and white. There is this huge area of grey. And we're trying to deal, and again, we're dealing with people. We've obviously had some tragedy here in New Zealand in the last week or so, which has, been touched pretty close to our house. And we're dealing ultimately with people. One of our Olympians took her life last week, and it's just all of a sudden there's this focus back on people, and so how do you deal with it as a coach? Because we're under this pressure to win. And yet if we have people who are, so I go right back to self-awareness. If I know myself and I'm in good shape as a coach, and I'm aware that my athletes have particular tendencies and I know how they behave and I'm aware of that and I can assist them, and I get them in a position where they're in a good space, I'm probably going to get good performance. Now, it's interesting you talk rugby because I'm still pretty close to the Crusaders. In fact, I had dinner with the guy who took my role at the Crusaders last night, Angus Gardner, who was played a bit of footy for Bath, played for England A. And we were just talking about this. And rugby gets a bit of bad press, but this stuff rugby does probably as well as any other sport at the moment. In New Zealand, the real care, the awareness of what the players are about. So that to me, using models or using different ways to explain ambiguity and try and make sense of it is important, because it is not black and white. It's not a binary system.
No, I think
I'm not sure if that makes sense, or I'm rambling. So you guys need to come in and get me back on, piste, or if this is the way you want your podcast to go, we're sweet.
I think I totally agree. And the way that I've seen it before, and the way that I kind of vision it, is that it's that grey in the middle, and it's almost we're navigating through a fog.
Oh, Harrison, beautiful. We're navigating through a fog. Yeah.
Love a metaphor, me. Love a metaphor. And sometimes it's about us as coaches being honest, and sometimes we don't have the answers, but we might know someone who knows the answers, and we can refer back to those models or those academic pieces. How important do you think that kind of honesty with self and honesty with others is key to these? Is key for these to be successful?
Yeah, look, those are the words around authenticity and being genuine. And I like your reference to the academic world too, because again, I think I will never go out there and wave a crystal in front of someone and say you're instantly going to be, because that's dangerous. I think our academic scientific approach must inform us, but the final line in every academic study, isn't it? These are our findings, but more study needs to be done. For Christ's sake, put your balls on the line. And so, but that's up to the coaches. The coaches then go, shit, I can have a go at that. I wonder, you think about, you're aware of the work of Rich Masters, I imagine, in implicit learning. Well, Rich is a good mate. We were undergrads together. We played rugby together at Otago University. So Rich is a good mate of mine. And, we sit down over a red wine and we talk about, shit, how can we actually do this at a real level? And that's kind of what we've got to, that's the authenticity, Harrison, of taking that academic stuff, coaches being brave enough to say, hey, I'm having a crack. Now, a key there, I reckon, and something we're just doing a little bit different now, we just started in New Zealand, is we're engaging with the athletes at the start of the process, not the end. So, typically you'll have a campaign or a season, and when do the athletes get asked for their view? In the review. Yeah. So what we're doing is I'm sitting down, I'm running a wee pilot here in Christchurch, and we're sitting down with the coach and their athletes, and we're saying to the athlete, okay, what is it you aspire to? What are the major milestones or transitions or movements you think you need to make? Now, when you're talking to a 15-year-old cyclist, they're not quite sure, so that's okay. But then you bury into it a bit further and you say, okay, what do you think your coach does well or might need to help you with? And what do you think they need to get better at? Mate, it's amazing. I mean, that's what I've been spending the last 2 or 3 months doing. And the stuff that these young athletes are saying, I want my coach to build a relationship with me. I want them to care. I want them to be able to understand other aspects of my life and also give me some direction in other aspects of my life. I'm okay with them pushing me. We just need to understand if they care for me, I know they can push me. I want them to be good at the sport coach. I want them to have been knowledgeable about the sport and good at coaching. But I also need to know that this other stuff is in place. And we're doing this with the athlete and the coach before the coach starts down their development process. And, so what we're doing, Harrison, is we're engaging them early, and we're getting some real insight into what might make a difference. Yeah.
So I think, there's a good example of that. I was reading about Sean Dyche at Burnley Football Club in the Premier League.
Yes.
And when he came and took over from Eddie Howe when Burnley weren't doing so well, that was the first thing he did was, he gave them all blank pieces of paper and asked them to write down where they want to be on a personal level, where they want to get to as a club, and what they're after from him and his coaching staff. And he does that every year now, and that's what he says is led to his longevity at Burnley. And that's kind of like heavily influenced, I think, myself and Chris. And we've got an example of when we did that going into Old Otley Indians when I was the assistant to Chris at the time. So that's really powerful stuff, and it's starting to filter down, I think.
Yeah.
Because it mirrors up with sort of what I've been reading Owen Eastwood's book, Belonging.
Yes, Owen. Yeah. I finished it a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the final straight with it now. When they touches about what Vern Cotter did when he took over at Scotland, how he wanted to bring in this Thistle leadership group, but because he realised when he first came in that the players needed lifting, he needed to be a bit more directive with them in terms of what they needed to be. But his 3-year plan was, by the time it came to year 3, the Thistle group would then, with the players, come up with a vision of how they wanted to play, the direction they wanted to get, and set the goals of what they wanted for the season. And that season, they end up finishing, they won all the home games, which was the objective, beat England, I think, away, and then lost to France last play of the game. And they were their objective was to try and win all them fixtures. And they finished the highest in the table and went from 10th to 5th in the standings. And that was through the engagement of bringing the players along for the journey. I suppose sort of if I was now a grassroots coach listening to this, and we've given some great examples, is how do you then engage with the different types of player that you would find at that community-based club? Because obviously you've worked with Canterbury Bay, so you've got that mixture of different player levels, the different motivations for them. So how do you tailor it for each one of their wants and needs?
You know, that's a great question, Chris. You mentioned Vern, just the small community that New Zealand is. So my wife went to school with Vern, knows him. I mean, I know Vern well as well when he was here. But that's the nature of New Zealand, mate. We're just, she grew up in Te Puke where Vern grew up as well. Right, yeah.
Well, we'll come to you to maybe try and get him to come on then.
Oh, Vern, he's a man of few words. But they're powerful words, usually. The grassroots, but, again, I reckon if you've got a coach, he's kind of got his own shit sorted and go, shit, I'm excited. I'm going to coach this bunch of young people. I just, in any level, I just try and find out, what, again, it's the awareness. Once you've got your shit sorted out, what's the awareness of them? Hey, what are you doing for a job? Or how are your studies going? Or, it might be 15-year-olds. Oh, tell me about your school. What are some of the other interests? What other sports do you play? Now, they don't have to be done in a formal way. I'd challenge every coach that if you couldn't, in the space of 10 minutes, have a 60-second conversation with 10 people and just wander around the changing rooms, pat on the back. Hey, how did school go today? What did you study? How did, now you love riding your BMX bike. Tell me, how's that going? It takes effort, it takes cognitive effort. It takes social effort, takes emotional effort. But if we sign the social contract that I'm going to be a coach and I'm got a group of parents or a group of people have entrusted their kids with me, well, then I've taken on board that responsibility. And and plus it's bloody fascinating. You just don't know. And that goes back, Harrison, to, what you were saying before. I use an analogy here in New Zealand. I talk to coaches and I have a couple of slides, and one I've got some mushrooms and the other one I've got a silver fern glistening in the sun. And I say, hey, do we treat our athletes like mushrooms, keep them in the dark and feed them bullshit? Or do we treat them like silver ferns where we water them and allow the sunlight to get on them? And how do you coach? And, for too long, I grew up in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I was coached by some interesting people in rugby, a prominent rugby, where you get this. And you had no idea what practice was going to look like. You were kept in the dark and fed bullshit. You read about whether you got picked or dropped in the newspaper. You never got a phone call. I mean, it was pretty, and some of that still exists. So, that's my analogy, I guess. Grassroots, no different. Find out, treat these young people like silver ferns and I know you have ferns in England. I know that. Shed some light on them and feed them, nurture them, give them water, show interest. Yeah.
I think that's the most powerful tool. And not only in these 60-second conversations, you get to know your players. You hear some quite fascinating stories sometimes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it's, and, I think, for me as a coach, I'm working with 16 to 18-year-olds, and the way that I work in the college is that they have college lessons and then they come and do their rugby program with us.
Yes.
So just seeing that dynamic with the players and actually engaging them, and and keeping them on track with academics is part of my role as well. And actually, the way that my kind of vision has changed on it is that, I'm coaching people, I'm coaching these kids that just so happen to be rugby players at the same time. They're aspiring to be Wasps academy players at the end of the day. So how do you for you then, how do you find that balance between making it that strong social element, but also that competitive edge and that drive to get them on board with the rugby side of the competitive nature of rugby as well?
It's a big question, and it's something we're debating seriously here at the moment. As this group of coaches I'm working with, the other night we met, and one of the coaches on it is a double Olympian, double medal. His name's Hayden Ralston. He came second to Bradley Wiggins at 2 Olympics on the track. Now he's a coach. So Rowley was sitting down the other night. He said, I'm not sure where this line is. Because, as a performance coach, I know I need to push sometimes, but I don't know what the line is. And that's part of that balance between the people first, they're doing the academic. Some of them aspire to high performance. Some of them only aspire to just be a social player or a social athlete, which we need to acknowledge, because we know sport's a strong socializing agent. And it's important for our community. What did Lennon say? Sport is the opiate of the masses, or something along those lines. But it's important to us, isn't it? Definitely. We wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't. It means a lot, because it gives us a break. It gives us something else to focus. So, roundabout way, Harrison, I think you guys will be aware of the work of Ryan and DC around self-determination theory. Purpose, mastery, autonomy, and responsibility. It doesn't matter what it is. You can have that conversation. Hey, what is it you're about? What's your purpose? I want to be a really good student. I want to enjoy my rugby or my sport. And in the end, I want to be able to contribute and give back. Okay. Within that, what is it you want to be really, really good at? And I'm not going to answer that, because everyone will come with it. Okay. And if you're to go ahead and do that, what level of self-responsibility and autonomy do you need, and how much do you need to help me? So I'm doing a lot of work just around using that little framework with coaches to say, well, there's your conversation. And within that conversation, Harrison, you can maybe ascertain the balance. And I'm always a bit worried about this word balance. Gilbert and Oaka's, I'm sorry if I'm sounding like I'm name dropping, but it's just New Zealand. So my wife played volleyball for New Zealand, and Gilbert was a New Zealand volleyball player, and they played together for the same club here in Christchurch. So Gilbert's a mate of mine. He came to our wedding. Gilbert's son plays for our local rugby club. So Gilbert and I stand on the sideline on a Saturday afternoon and watch his son play. And, so we have these chats and we talk shit. But Gilbert used the analogy of the 3-legged stool, whether it's social, emotional, physical, whether it's academic, family, and sport, whatever the 3 legs might be. And actually, Harrison, at some point in time, the legs do get out of the length changes and people do slide one way or the other. I guess that's called life, isn't it? Life is not. And within that self-determination concept, also acknowledging, hey, you'll have different focuses and things won't quite go so well at one point. And how do we manage the imbalance rather than say we're going to have a perfectly balanced life? And that's, again, front-loading stuff. And if I switch to high performance, I think we sell a myth. People get into high performance environments. I want to go to the Olympics. I want to win an Olympic medal. And we make it sound like this wonderful bloody utopia, and actually it's about the most brutal, psychologically damaging environments you can be in. But we don't send that narrative at the start. And I think that's where we get into danger, because we don't set it out. The Dutch are doing it really well. The Dutch have I work with a guy called John Hellemans. He's a doctor. He's a Kiwi now, but he came out to New Zealand and he became a triathlon. He was like he's internationally revered as a top triathlon coach. So good that the Dutch brought him back into his system for 4 years. And he talked about the basically the onboarding they do at the start of a program with a new group of athletes, parents. They do some testing around all the people. They talk to them about what it's going to look like. And they also talk to them about what the end looks like, if they've been successful or they haven't, and the care that will be available for them. And John, typically, he's turned into a Kiwi more than a Dutchman. He says, I thought they needed to toughen up, he said to me. And he said, and train more, because that's sort of the Kiwi attitude, we'll train a bit harder. But he actually he said, and, Holland did pretty well, the Netherlands did pretty well, and they've actually got a really holistic program. So, right back to your original question, I think, again, knowing the individual, acknowledging there will be imbalances, understanding what they want to be good at, where they want to get to, and how much freedom and autonomy they want and how much assistance they want. If we can establish that, then shit, we've got a pretty healthy environment.
I think that sort of links down that a coach asked me this question the other day. Is from a rugby perspective, we're always wanting to encourage him to play through games and give players this freedom. But then they're like, surely you've got to find that. And again, he used the word balance of that between boundaries and autonomy. So, where do we draw that line of, well, actually, no, this is the expectation that we have, along with the autonomy of making them decisions. And I was like, well, that's like the $1 million question, really. That's the relationship that you've got with your players to be able to set that as a standard. So do you have outlined beforehand a level of behaviors that you're going to align to for the whole season that they're aware of? And if you drop below them behaviors, and that's probably when you need to be more of an authoritarian and direct that back, or get the players to do it themselves, especially within a team environment, get them to drive the standards from within. Because there's no golden bullet, I suppose, is there? It's just trying to do you. It goes back to in the season 1 of the podcast, we spoke about the importance of understanding your who, understanding your participants, and the impact that can have on the whole environment that you create.
Yeah,
And
I think you're spot on. That advice you gave, Kris, is just absolutely spot on. You guys would be aware of, and look, again, I've said I love a model, and I've thrown a couple out, but the Dreyfus, the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition, where they go through novice through to expert, and even in that there's a debate. Nicholas Nassim Taleb, in the Black Swan, argues there is no such thing as experts. So that whole notion of people say I'm an expert, and I always go, yeah. What people are, what's the thing? I've got a BS, an MS, and a PhD. I'm an expert. I've got bullshit, more shit piled high and deep. Sorry to. I mean, look, I'm an academic. I would have stayed at university forever if I could have, but Otago was going to kill me, I think, if I'd stayed there any longer.
Kris has.
Yeah, I'm not leaving just yet.
Good on you, Kris. Bloody oath, mate. Live the life. That's that. Going back to Dreyfus saying, well, I will coach quite directively here with some authority because you're new and you're novice and you need rule governed behavior. And as we move down, I'll start to provide greater degrees of freedom because you'll have more responsibility and you'll have more autonomy. But again, it goes right back to that. Treat them like silver ferns. Talk to them about, this is the way I coach. Here's how I will approach this stuff. You'll find I'll be quite directive. I watched Wayne Smith one day. It was when I was working for Academy High Performance Sport New Zealand. I was observing Smithy coaching the All Blacks, the backline. And I seriously, within the space of 5 minutes, he would have gone from directing novices because they were trying something for the first time through to really high level questioning and getting the players' engagement and getting the players' input. And to see that operation and, that skill and being able to move up and down. And I still think age group coaches can be skillful at that. In fact, they could perhaps be even more skillful because they're dealing with more challenging situations often.
So what did that questioning look like? Because I think that's something that a lot of coaches would come back to me from when I've done coach edits. You keep talking about questioning, but what type of questioning?
Chris, it would be like, what did we notice? What did you notice when we do that? Where did you see space? What other options did we have available? Who else did you notice? You know, it was those sorts of. So Chris, I guess he was using questions to raise awareness.
Yeah, because I remember just referring back to when you were on the Top Performance podcast, you spoke there about how, you know, with your questioning, it needs to be how you can get that player or participant to delve into their own mind and actually understand what it is that they're doing. And I think as coaches, we sometimes tend to ask the safe questions, what happened here, the how can we do this better or such like that. When actually, if you're with a group of players for so long, they probably get programmed to the answers that you expect. Therefore, they're not actually giving you what they're thinking. They're giving you the answer that they think that you want. Therefore, if we can ask more questions like describe to me,
beautiful,
like that, then you get them to think more, and that thinking then actually gives you an understanding of what they actually saw. Because at the end of the day, they've made a decision based on what they saw, which is completely different to the view that you've got wherever you happen to be stood.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Perspective. You know, there's the old classic of perspective, of the lens. You know, the lens of perspective. Where was I? What did I see? Totally different view, and I need to find that out, because what I saw might not actually be relevant as a coach. And that comes back to that kind of power dynamic, doesn't it? This was a discussion we're having the other day. And Harrison, some of your young guys you're coaching at the moment, they'll be incredibly intelligent, incredibly aware, and have contributions. But what happens, we live, particularly in the Western world, the way we've been brought up, we live in this power dynamic where the hierarchy know the answers and we're immediately subservient. I do it. The moment I'm in a situation with a CEO or someone, I'm probably a bit quieter than I normally would. Why is that? Because it's the power dynamic. So we've got these intelligent athletes come along, but the coach is the coach, so I'll just keep quiet. Wayne Smith was great at trying to draw the stuff out to say, hey, we're working together here, and you guys are exceedingly, the wisdom lies in the room. You think about kids, you need your iPhone fixed, who do you go to? You go to the 18, 15, 16, 17-year-old, don't you? What other wisdom have they got? They might see things in the game that we've never seen. Yeah. And then, of course, the power dynamic flips around. When they're performing, the focus is all on them, and we put the responsibility on them to make decisions that we don't allow them to make when we're coaching them, because we're in charge.
That goes all the way back to trust and actually getting them on that shared. I think Chris has referred to it as the shared energy bus.
Shared energy bus, beautiful. Yeah,
and it's stolen from John Gordon's energy bus. So.
Yeah, be a magpie, mate. Flog everything.
Well, I've been on Chris's energy bus, and I'm unfortunately I've had to check out a little bit. But no, it goes back to that trust, and actually, can these players give me? Do they trust in me that they can give me an honest answer, that I won't put them down if our vision, if we're not aligned with our vision. So how do you get people? How would you get, or how have you seen people get people to join the energy bus? Not Chris's, but.
Well, I'll take the concept of the energy bus and go down the line of trust that you just mentioned there, Harrison. And I had a situation when I was working at New Zealand about New Zealand cricket about 3 years ago. So when I left the Crusaders, I went back into international sport, went back to New Zealand cricket. Well, I went into New Zealand cricket. I'd had the good fortune to work with both Mike Hesson and Gary Stead when they were provincial coaches, and Shane Bond. So I'd had a lot of interaction, but not as a part of the New Zealand cricket system. Interestingly, I go into New Zealand cricket, they had no high performance development process at all, which is quite remarkable. So when I started at the end of 2015, New Zealand cricket did not have a high performance coach strategic plan. They had no, so I started with a clean sheet really, which was awesome, but I had relationships with people who were major, and one of the things I had to do was get round the provinces. So we've only got 5 provinces. How many counties are there in England?
Too many. Yorkshire. That's all people need to know.
But I was doing some work in one province, and it was pretty apparent that there was a low level of trust between the coach of that team and New Zealand cricket, at the high performance unit, me. Not me personally, but, what we were trying to do. So I went back to my colleagues and I said, mate, we got some work to do. Our trust is low here. And how can you have a high, how can we help him produce black caps? Because we ain't got that many players. Because we need these coaches to produce black caps, because our succession planning and our player base is so small. So we actually, if you come across Frances Friel, she was, how the Americans often do, a professor will also be involved in a major business. So she was the chief operating officer for Uber. She came in because when they first started off, it was all good. And then they started to tank, and she went in, and it was a culture issue. And she is a professor, and the work area she works in is high level trust. And she's got a great TED talk. So if you look up TED talk trust or whatever, it pops up. And she had sort of 3 dimensions, which tie into what I've already talked about. And it was stuff I did. She said, to develop high level trust, you need to be authentic. Okay. So I'm seeing authentic Kris and Harrison tonight. I've got a feel for you guys. I think we'd go all right having a pint at the pub. I've got that straight away. But because we're seeing the real person, bearing in mind when we coach, it is a performance, because that's the coach's performance space, but it's got to be the real person who's coaching, not something that's artificial. She also said then we have to go in, and this is the awareness of self-awareness of others piece, go in with huge empathy. So, okay, what's gone on in Harrison's day today? Kris, you've had to get up early. You get there, the office is closed. Shit's already gone on in your day. I need to understand what has happened to you. I need to be aware of that, regardless of what's gone on my day. What's gone on your day?
I was all so before 7 a.m.
I feel for you, mate. I wake up at 5 every morning, just ding like that. Anyway, we're coming into summer, or spring, so I'm okay about that. So we've got authenticity, empathy, which is awareness of self, awareness of the people who are in front of me. I'm going into the situation. I can't go in here hot because it's already highly emotional, and these people are dealing with some stuff. So I've got to put my agenda to the side here. But how many times do you see people come firing in? No empathy. And the last bit is, and I like it, it ties in again, I'm not going to wave crystals in front of you guys and try and mesmerize you. It's about rigor of logic. So we must go in well prepared. We must be strong in our conviction that this stuff is well supported, literature, whatever. And that way, in that triangle of authenticity, I go in with empathy, and I go in well prepared, and I have a rigor of logic. People will, that's kind of her trust triangle. And that spoke to me, because all those 3 areas are the way I kind of conduct myself. Yeah. And you can sit down and think about, so, tomorrow you got coaching tomorrow, Harrison, or today, or whatever. You can say, okay, what's Harrison looking like today? Am I ready to go? Am I me? Am I my real self and identity? Yep. Will I make an attempt to connect with my players and understand their day? Yep. And am I well prepared? Am I organized? Rigor of logic could be, I've actually got a practice plan today and I know what we're going to do. Yep. I'd say you present with that, the players will go, here's a coach who's organized. He's engaged. and he's real, yeah, I think I could trust him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, not original, but when I heard that, it spoke to elements in my life of the last 20 years of stuff I've inherently done. Again, Kris, I think models can often help explain behavior we've already been exhibiting over the years, and go, it's a confirmation thing, not confirmation bias, but just confirmation.
It's one of the things I was also going to ask you about, actually, was you spoke again when I listened to that Top Performance podcast about intellectual humility versus intellectual arrogance. And I'll ask you, that's another reason, sort of linked to sort of why me and Harrison set up this, was actually how can we bring these ideas of theory with a more practical view that people could utilize and use? Because there isn't, everything needs to still be accessible. It needs to be able to digest, but people see sort of the academic side and think it's going to be over complex and not relevant to them, when actually some of it is pretty straightforward. If you read between the lines, you can apply it quite well to your own environment. I thought that was just a really interesting point, that when you've got this knowledge, you can't just use it as this is what I need, this is what I need to do. It's, well, how does it work for you?
Yeah, look, there's a whole lot of things you've raised there. I think people get knowledge and they use it as power. So Harrison, I know more shit than you, therefore I've got a power dynamic over you. That's one way people use it. And of course, that's your sociopaths, unfortunately. We don't want them anywhere near coaching. But that happens. And they're the people we've got to be really careful of, because they can do damage. So, what's that learning culture look like? I use the analogy, I've actually got a pink balloon lying around here somewhere. It's the old balloon. It's empty on the inside and the outside. So surface area and what's inside equals the surface area. I put some knowledge into the balloon, surface area increases. So actually the surface area is bigger than the interior of the balloon, which is what I know. So the surface area is what I don't know. So the moment I know some stuff, the amount I don't know gets actually bigger, because my awareness of what I don't know gets bigger. You can get people down that line going, shit, actually, yeah, I wasn't aware of that, or I didn't know that. Then you're in that conversation, as opposed to, Kris, you must do this. Harrison, you must do this. Yeah, really? Look, it's a challenge. We're humans. People have mental models that are entrenched. The skill of the coach is to ask questions to get those mental models to emerge. People like a Smithy, I've done a lot of Gary Stead, Steady. I had a conversation with him. How do you coach Kane Williamson? The last thing you need to do to Kane Williamson is tell him something. You got to go down. How did that feel? What were you working on today, and how did that feel? And he said, I was just, because Kane, notorious for playing the ball late. He says, I was just trying to constantly work the ball there. Oh, how was that going? Watch Steady in that relationship. Wow. It's really, really fundamental, simple stuff, but it's not easy.
Like you say, that player's got that power of knowledge as well.
Players got the power of knowledge, but you also know that, this goes back to the implicit learning stuff, Rich Masters' work. If we bring too much cognitive awareness, do we actually shut down the very thing that the athletes are good at? Reinvestment. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a prime example of, I was reading about Dina Asher-Smith, a sprinter over here.
Yes.
She went to the 2019 World Championships, and in the semi-finals she was absolutely awful out of the blocks, and she had to work really hard to catch up to qualify for the final. So the first thing she did, she went and spoke to her coach and said, I need to do some block work. And he said, no, we're just going to we're going to go and do our normal warm-up, because she knew what she needed to do in the final, and she went out and aced the final and came away with a gold medal. So it's that understanding the athlete, and actually, if we, like you said, if we're honest and we show them the silver fern at the start of the journey, then they're gonna trust us as coaches that we know where we can get them to that end. And for her, it was a gold medal at the World Championships. That was that's
a beautiful piece of coaching, to say, no, actually we'll do less, not more.
Yeah. And it's been, it goes back to the start where you were saying it's about being self-aware. It's about, right, as a coach, I've analysed the situation. What's going to work best for both myself and the athlete or athletes that I've got in front of me now. And it's being honest with both ourselves first before we can be honest with the athlete.
Do you guys see, here's a question for you, like, one of the things is we're moving down. I still believe that coaches should lead programs. You've got to have, I know it might sound a bit disrespectful, but you can't have the lunatics running the asylum. And, athletes are special. At a high performance level, that is life on the knife edge. They have some slightly different personality characteristics. That's why they're high performance athletes. But we still need someone leading that. But if we can get to this place of what we call, co-construction, then, which is kind of what you're talking about, Harrison, is let's involve the athlete in the process, not have them where we're a coach and I will do something to you, Kris, because I'm the coach, so I will do something to you. I'll do something to the person rather than work with the person. And I know we've, as I say, we've had some tragedy here, but we've also got some real shifts with a whole lot of sports. I mean, you look at Gordon Walker, the way, and Gordy's, I know Gordy well, and the way he works with Lisa Carrington, that's a co-construction. Yeah. That's not a typical athlete-coach relationship. It's a co-construction born over years, admittedly, and success. But to see the way they work, it's a different dynamic. Yeah.
Well, where I think coaches are still important at the high performance level, and you talk about the high performance athletes got a different mindset. So it's where the coach fits in there is that a high performance athlete will spend every day, for a sprint, for example, just sprint until they feel like they've got it right. When actually it's the coach's job to put in a different lens, to try and frame it differently, to almost protect the athlete from potentially injuries or overworking to something in which it's more of a negative than it is a positive. So
I love your language there, Harrison. You did right. That it provides another lens, another frame, another perspective. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe sometimes that time to say, hey, I think stop. We've done enough. Which is kind of the opposite. The old days, we didn't get it right, so we'll go and do some more.
The old 1,000-hour approach. You're going to stay on the pitch until it's done.
Well, Jesus, didn't that piece of work get badly represented? All of a sudden we'll take chess players and musicians and we'll say that every athlete now has to do 10,000 hours of practice.
Bonkers.
Yeah. I'm not saying I don't disagree with practice. But I think again, it's don't fall in love with your model.
It's spot on. And then just one question I wanted to ask is, with the world and the culture and the way that we see individuals and people nowadays is ever changing, and we try and celebrate, individuality and the differences in individual people. Have you got examples of how we can still celebrate that individuality in a team environment, but then also get them working as a cohesive unit at the same time? Because I think that's where a lot of grassroots coaches especially are struggling. I know that I've struggled with it in my coaching journey, and I've seen other people with it struggle with it as well. Have you got any kind of advice or?
Yeah, well, it's funny. It goes, if you're particularly in a team sport. Let's use the context of a team sport where you got those individuals. Those 60-second conversations allow you to be then as a coach to begin to understand. So let's use a rugby team because I was a rugby coach and this is the space we've worked in. So one of the things is understanding the elements of the different cultural backgrounds. So the Pacifica, whether it's Samoan or Tongan, because they're actually all, everyone goes, it's a Polynesian culture, but they all have different nuances. So, we did, you'll see, the All Blacks have the haka, but we do some Samoan and Tongan stuff. I've coached teams where we get in the circle and we go, mili, and we, and that was, and that's in New Zealand. So how do you, England, Great Britain is now a culturally diverse country. if I was a coach, if I was a cricket coach or a rugby coach, I'd be looking at going, okay, what's the cultural diversity I got in front of me? How can I utilize that to enhance the overall culture so that people, again, grow internal awareness? Because all those players of those different cultures turn up. The one thing that binds them is they're all rugby players, yeah?
Yeah.
But they're just not rugby players, as you said before, Harrison. They're people, and they have these other lives. And then, and this is where coaching is, I think, exciting, but it takes energy. This is where coaches have to work hard. It takes energy for them to organise and bring that group together. And I guess sometimes are coaches aware that when you get, I've done some work with a super team this year, and one of the things was the coaches probably had to make a jump that was a little bit big for them, and they just weren't aware of the workload. Again, they were probably thrust into stuff. And I think even a coach at a young age group, hey, it's actually not about what you do on the training field. Your energy's probably got to go here. What's the diversity you got in front of you? Who are they? And how do I utilize that? So that's a path we've always gone. I've always gone down with any of the teams we work with. Yeah, was bringing that in, not me saying this will be your culture, these will be your values. Getting them to, bring it forth. Yeah, I don't know. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, no, and yeah, it's a very complex thing, and it's probably something that coaches will all have their own different stances and imprint that very differently. But no, it was definitely fascinating to hear what you've got to say on that.
Yeah, cool.
And I think we've brought it full circle there. Really, it comes down to understanding your players, understanding yourself, and then being able to bring both of them together to maximise the environment that you can create. I think there'll be a lot of coaches that I think will take a lot away from this chat, Richard.
And Kris, look, can I just add to that, the joy of doing that and actually saying, hey, yeah, it would be nice if we won the competition, but most teams just about every team, the joy for me has been doing the work. We use the term mahi here in New Zealand. Mahi is Maori word for work. So if you do the mahi around that stuff, that's actually the joy of coaching. And then you sit back. Robbie Dean said to me, I remember a quote, Robbie said, he said, Saturday, super game or Friday night or whatever, he says, I'm whistling when I'm walking down the tunnel because my work's done. And that's the pleasure, the work you do during the week. Even if you're a volunteer coach, I reckon that's the pleasure. And then you sit back and you watch it unfold. And that's the joy. Yeah. And we can't ever lose sight of that joy of what we do, making a difference to people. Yeah.
And I think that's the bit that gets lost within coaching at that grassroots community level as well, is they just forget that, it is about people. It is about the inspiring the people that are in front of you, bringing them on the journey, taking them on a journey, because if you do it in the right way, you might not necessarily know where that journey is going to go. The sport is sort of how we bring them people together. And like I said, I think definitely something I've sort of realized is that energy. It's the energy that you bring to that's going to maximize the type of environment that you create with your people. Because if you've got them relationships, actually the sports side should come that a little bit easier, because you're not putting out fighters. Everyone's engaged with you.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. Cool.
Richard, thank you very much for giving up your time today. It's been fascinating speaking to you. I could have gone for probably another hour around all this and gone down all sorts of different rabbit holes. It's been fascinating. I've really enjoyed it.
Guys, thank you. Look, end of a day of lockdown, so I've been at home all day. When we finally got the dates and time sorted, I was really looking forward to it tonight, because it's one of those days where you don't have a lot of contact with people. So I was thinking, this will be quite cool to catch up with these two guys and see how things go. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. We know all about lockdown. We've been through enough.
I know you guys have done. We've been lucky. Our lives have been pretty much normal here, really. To tell you the truth, may not be the same now with Delta loose, but we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Baking got you through it, didn't it, Harrison?
Yes, yeah, a bit. Got into baking and podcasting.
Baking and podcasting.
Yeah.
Baking and podcasting. I love craft beer and red wine, so that's always a danger you see at my end.
And if you ever find yourself over here, we can always pop down to the pub.
Oh, I enjoyed. I've been to England a few times, and yeah, I've never not had a good time, Harrison.
There you go.
So yeah, thanks again, Richard. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. Yep. Take care. Go well, everyone.
Harrison, episode 3, Richard Smith, people. I think I could have again spoke to Richard for hours after that.
Oh yeah, no, he's a cracking bloke with lots of great ideas, and it's just once again, it's just great hearing about the environments that he's been in, that he's helped set up, and he's been part of, and the experiences that he's witnessed himself.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the key things. He's coached through with New Zealand cricket in their environment. He's been involved in the Crusaders. He's worked for that high performance sport in New Zealand. He's got a backlog of environments that he's been working in, and that focus on people seemed right in the core of everything that he'd done sort of in that process. I mean, just to sort of remind the listeners of what we spoke about with Sergio, first of all, around that people was around that developing a belief in me, you and us, but then also how you have that athlete and staff management. I think Richard really sort of brought that to life from them practical environments that he'd been in.
Yes. Oh, he really did. And and there's so many things that have stuck with me, and have really got me thinking, and actually trying. I remember the first one was he was talking about how you coaching people, how you coaching you're not coaching rugby players, you're coaching people, and that 10 minutes before a session you can go and have 10 1 minutes, tongue twister there, 10 1 minute conversations with 10 different players, and just ask them about their day. Do not even bring up the sport. Don't bring up the sport they're about to play. Just have a conversation with them, 1 minute. And that was, I went and tried it.
Oh, did you? And how did you find it?
Oh, it was brilliant. It was, you actually, like I said in the episode, it's, you find out more things about the players that you're coaching. And I'm talking, yes, I'm working with 16 to 18-year-olds, and getting one word out of some of them is difficult enough. But you see them in a whole different light. You see them get excited about things that they enjoy doing, and not only does that, you have more interest in them. They feel like that you respect and you want to listen. You're there to listen to them. We're here to build relationships, and I think that's what really kind of can separate coaches. There's lots of coaches out there that can have great technical understanding and tactical understanding of their sport, but can you coach it to other human beings?
Well, we've spoke a few times post that interview with Richard, and the key analogy that stood out for both of us was that, do you treat your athletes like mushrooms and keep them in the dark and feed them bullshit, or do you let them be in the sunshine and grow like a silver fern and sort of be the best that they possibly can be? And I think it comes down to how you treat the people around you. If you act like an arsehole, you're not going to get the results that you think in your head you should be getting, just because you're acting like an arsehole. And I think, recently there's been big things in the news around Ronaldo going back to Manchester United and the relationship that he had with Sir Alex Ferguson, and that sort of has helped influence that move back to Manchester. And I think I remembered reading that his dad was ill in London or Portugal, and he went to see Sir Alex about having a miss a day, miss 2 days, and Sir Alex said to him, take as long as you need, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, a week. He was prepared to lose his player in, when they were running for championships then, because he knew the value of, well, actually, I can't be a dick here. His dad's ill. He needs to go and spend time with his family, and he had that connection with his players to be able to do it. And that is a manager who was renowned for things like the hairdryer treatment. He still had that relationship with each one of his players that he would allow to allow things like that to happen. And even with David Beckham, for example, they ended where he kicked a boot at his head, and the relationship might not have ended on the best time, but he still calls him the boss. He still has that high respect for him because of everything else that he did with it. And I think that mirrors sort of similar to what we touched on with Sergio about how you can have them high standards, but you still got to be a people person first. That driven benevolence. But
yeah, and I also think it's got about different challenge points for different people as well. And there's a time and a place for it. When we want to create competitive environments because sport is competitive. But that, like you said, that doesn't mean you doesn't mean you have to be an arsehole. There might be a time in which you might be an arsehole to your players, to see a reaction, to test and to prod and make them feel uncomfortable. But you've got to remember that there's a safety net there, that you are still managing human beings, you are managing people, and like you talk about and he's similar, and Richard mentions it quite well in terms of those challenge points with when he was talking about Wayne Smith and when he was watching him lead the back session, when actually his language and the way he spoke to the players and how he was able to get points across really, really quickly was because he had that understanding of the players. The players trusted Wayne Smith that he would get them as a coach to where they need to be, and Wayne Smith trusted them. So he knew what he could say and how he could say it to them in order for them to get immediate success at that time.
Definitely. Again, and it comes down to, he referenced that TED talk by Francis Farrell on trust. And, I went back and watched that, and I know you did too. And the key three things on that were around that authenticity, logic, and empathy. So, authenticity was that people know that they're interacting with the real you. It's not a false face. You can get that through having them 1-minute conversations with all their players, that they get to know you as well as you knowing them. The logic is, that they have faith in your judgment, your sport, you know what you're doing, and that you have empathy and actually care about them. And if you get all three of them levels and you gain that trust, then, people will, get on the bus, to quote the analogy that we used a few times, even with the episode of Richard. So, I think that for me has to be the key message that everyone should be taking away from this, is how do I ensure that when I'm with my players that I'm being as authentic as possible, that I do understand my sport, and that reverts back to what we spoke about in season 1, and that they trust my judgment in why I'm doing what I'm doing and when I'm doing it. And then you can have that empathy with them, that, if they're having a bad day, you're aware of it because you're speaking to them and engaging with them on a level playing field, I suppose. There's no level of hierarchy. You're just treating them like people. Yeah. And that's how you get people to move in that direction.
Yeah, I know that I've mentioned it and used it before about Mauricio Pochettino at Tottenham, that he'd go in and shake every player's hand before a session, and if he felt the energy was a little bit low, or someone was having a bit of a bad day, or the squad was having a bit of he'd flip the whole session, because he knows his players, he knows what a bad day looks like for them. He knows what will work to get their energy to perk up, and that takes time, and it goes back to what we discussed right at the start of season 1. You've got to understand who you're coaching first, and that isn't. I think people get lost with that a little bit. With, right, I've moved into a new environment, I've done all these icebreakers, I understand them, but it's an ongoing process. As we discussed with Richard, it's not black or white, it's grey, it's foggy, and we've got to navigate our way through that fog. And as human mind is very complex and is ever changing. So, what are we going to do to evolve with these players for long-term success? I reckon, that you can be an arsehole, with a coach, and you might get short-term success. But in terms of, we're looking at, longevity here, you've got to have that. You've got to have that trust in the players, and the players got that trust in you.
Definitely. Another great episode. I think, not to blow our own trumpet, but I think I was fascinated. I could have spoke to Richard for ages, and we've had some email conversations with him afterwards, and he's a top bloke. Definitely someone I'll be keeping in contact with. So we have 2 week 2-week break. We're back here with we're on environment next week. We have Professor John Lyle coming to chat with us about that. It's another great interview, great discussion. Charlie's got all our details at the end. Make sure you reach out and let us know what you think. And we'll see you next time.
Cheers for listening. Don't forget to join in the discussion at Big Breakdown HQ on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.